taught me the courage of stars before you left. How life carries on endlessly, even after death, with sureness of breath. You explain the infinite, how rare and beautiful it is to even exist. I couldn't help but ask you to say it all again. I tried to write it down, but I could never find the pen. I'd give anything to hear you say it one more time. That the universe was made just to be seen by my eye. That I couldn't help but ask you to say it all again. I tried to write it down, but I could never find the pen. I'd give anything to hear you say it one more time. That the universe was made just to be seen by my eyes. The sureness of breath. I'll explain the infinite, how rare and beautiful it truly is that we exist. Sweetheart, you look a little tired. When did you rest easy? Come in and make yourself right at home. Stay as long as you need. Tell me is something wrong. If something's wrong, you can count on me. You know, take my heart clean apart if it helps yours beat. It's okay if you can't find the words. Let me take your coat and this weight of your shoulders. Like a force to be reckoned with, a mighty ocean or a gentle kiss. I will love you with every single thing I have. Like a tidal wave will make a mess, or calm waters if that serves you best. I will love you without any strings attached. It's okay if you can't catch your breath. You can take the oxygen straight out of my own chest. To talk about myself, tell me where it hurts. I just wanna build you up till you're good as new. And maybe one day I'll get around to fixing myself too. I don't even know where to start. Already tired of trying to recall when it all fell apart. I just wanna love you, to love you, to love you well. I just wanna learn how somehow to be
Good morning, Discovery Church. You lovely, lovely people. Will you guys stand with us? We're going to sing some worship songs. Yesterday, I didn't say, will you stand with us, thinking that people would catch on. It didn't work. So, will you please stand with us as we sing some songs?
I was buried beneath my shame. Who could carry that kind of weight? It was my truth till I met you. I was breathing but not alive. All my failures I tried to hide. It was my truth till I met you. You called my name and I ran out of that grave. Out of the darkness into your glorious name. You called my name and I ran out of that grave. Out of the darkness into your glorious name. Now your mercy has saved my soul. Now your freedom is all that I know. The old man knew Jesus when I met you. You called my name and I ran out of that grave. Out of the darkness into your glorious name. You called my name and I ran out of that grave. Out of the darkness into your glorious day. I needed rescue, my sin was heavy. The chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I was an orphan. Now you've called me citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing. Now your love is the air I'm breathing. I have a future, my eyes are open. 'Cause
Let the king of my heart be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from. Oh, here's my song. Let the king of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, here's my song. You are good. Oh to move into this time of communion. And it's this time where we remember the sacrifice that Jesus made for us on the cross. And I know that it can feel so weird to sit in this large room with people you don't know, to eat a little piece of bread and drink a little cup of juice. And I don't think that that's necessarily what Jesus wanted for us. I think that he wanted it to be this intimate moment with him, to just be with him. In fact, when he was doing the Last Supper, he looked at his disciples and he said, I've waited for this moment with you. I've longed for this moment with you. Because I'm going to go and I'm going to die on the cross. And so knowing that, he said, this is my body broken for you. And this is my blood that will be spilled out for you. So take it and remember me always. He wanted it to be this intimate moment because this is what forgiveness looks like. This is what love looks like. Love looks like laying down a life for someone else. So what's going to happen are some trays are going to come up and down the aisle with a little wafer and a cup of juice. Take one of each of those, take them on your own time, and let this be your intimate moment with him. And if what I'm saying just seems crazy or just doesn't make sense to you, that's okay. Just pass the tray on. There'll be a chance for you to talk to somebody after the service and ask any questions that you have. But just keep the tray moving for now. There's no shame in that. Also, if you're new here, you're going to hear crashing of the cup. And that's our way of saying that it's finished. He knew what we were going to do before we did it. He knew the choices that we were going to make before we made them. And he still said it is finished. So let's pray and let's enjoy that meal together. Jesus, thank you. Thank you for what you did on the cross for us. But more than that, thank you for this ritual that we call communion, where we can have an intimate moment with you, where we can sit and be with you and remember your love for us, that your love looks like laying down life for us, dirty and broken us. Jesus, we pray that we can feel you in this moment, that we will remember you in this moment, and that we won't feel shame or guilt, that we'll feel peace and love. We love you, and it's in your holy and precious name. Amen.
I think about the time I was in the 3rd grade, we started going to church. Went to church all through middle school, high school, did youth group. Actually went to a Christian college and have a theology degree and did ministry. That's kind of the surface level part of the story. My parents were divorced, and so there was a lot of pain in my childhood, and as I got older, a lot of that, it wasn't on my radar, and it certainly wasn't resolved. I didn't understand that that's part of what Jesus came to die for and to accomplish was that healing. And so despite going to church and being in youth group and all of those things, doing ministry, I lived out of a lot of pain, a lot of brokenness. Spent a weekend with Doug, and he mentioned, or he brought up a book. It was just everything that I had never heard in youth group, in Bible college, and ministry, and sermon after sermon after sermon. It was stuff that I had never heard, and I started experiencing God in new ways, and healing and restoration, and learning who I was, learning more who Jesus actually is.
So I'm Doug Anderson, and I've known Travis for over 20 years, and I have to say that he has grown more in the past 3 to 4 years than all the years prior that I've known him. And a huge part of that is just that he has really done some hard work as far as getting to know his story and not allowing past mistakes to define himself. But he's also connected with a group of guys that have really, truly been a band of brothers. And so I'm really excited about his decision to be baptized. There's some opportunity for him to make a real fresh start, and I'm excited for what's to come.
I think what baptism is for me and why now is understanding, knowing what it's been, knowing the challenges, knowing the difficulty. I'm not saying that life's not good and that it hasn't been good, but it's been hard. It's saying I know all that stuff and I'm still going to choose to follow it. That's why here and why now.
With great anticipation and great expectation that I baptize you in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit.
You guys can go ahead and stand up and sing this last song with us.
You unravel me with a melody. You surround me with a song of deliverance from my enemies, till all my fears are gone. I'm no longer a slave to fear, 'cause I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear, 'cause I am a child of God. From my mother's womb, you have chosen me. Love has called my name. I've been born again into your family. Your blood flows through my veins. I'm no longer a slave to fear, 'cause I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear, 'cause I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear, 'cause I am a child of God. I'm no longer I'm no longer a slave to fear, 'cause I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear, 'cause I am a child of God. You guys can have a seat.
I've been on a long road with the devil right beside me, rising with the morning sun. It's the hunger that drives me. Oh Lord, set my soul, take my pain and turn it into gold. It's all I know. All I know, all I know is champion. I can take a beating, I'll rise again, running through the jungle until the end. I can live forever, I'll rise again, keep rising up. I'm champion. I can take a beating, I'll rise again, running through the jungle until the end.
Hey, good to see you and welcome to DCC. So we're in the second week now of this series that we're in called Rebels, and we're working from a definition of rebel as a rebel who's someone who rises up in opposition against something, and we're working from this assumption that even though it's a little weird for us to comprehend or to think about at first, that if we really want this life that God has for us, this life that we all came in here chasing after this morning, then in some ways being a rebel is something we ought to want to be. And it's something that God created us to be. So if you weren't here last week, we kicked it off with talking about the story of a man named Nehemiah from the Old Testament. We came to this conclusion that, a big part of the life that we're looking for is jumping into this larger story, a story that's larger than our own, with the story that God's telling in the world around us. As we do that, every single day we should expect it to be hard. We should expect opposition. As we do that, every morning we need to wake up. We need to say, I got to build and I got to fight. And what we're talking about is we got to join God in the larger story He's telling and build His kingdom, and we got to fight for our own hearts and the hearts of people around us. So that was where we started. Good, so far so good. We're off to a good start, but so much more to talk about and talk through as we jump back into this today. But before we do that, hey, we just want you to know that it means a lot to us. It means a whole lot to us that you've decided to spend a little bit of your weekend time with us. We know that the name of the game in the world that we live in is busyness, that we're all really, really busy. Time is a precious commodity to all of us, and somehow, some way, whether you were convinced, coerced, or tricked, you've landed here with us, and we're really happy about that to have you. We're really privileged to have you here with us, and we hope that when you walk out these doors today, even if you didn't believe everything that you heard in this place, when you left here today, that was a place where all my story was safe, regardless of how it reads. That was a place I was in today where I belonged, regardless of what I did or did not believe. Those people seem to be a lot like me, because it's true. I promise you it's true. We're not perfect. We don't have it all figured out, but we hope you have a great experience here in your time here with us today, and we hope you want to come back and do this again with us real soon. So special shout out to you if you're brand new, and of course to all of our online friends who are checking us out right now too. I'm a Kentucky boy, so when I was a kid growing up back in Kentucky, we used to frequently go down to see my grandma. We called her Ma Ruby. So we'd go down and see Ma Ruby down in the sticks of Kentucky. She lived in a small town in Kentucky about 90 minutes south of Louisville called Horse Cave, Kentucky. That was where my grandma lived, and it was really close to the sticks of Hart County, Kentucky, where my dad grew up. And I had lots of fond memories about visiting with Ma Ruby and spending the night with her in that little one-bedroom apartment that she had in this community that was exclusively for older people. But I remember drinking RC Cola from a bottle with my Ma Ruby. It was amazing. I had to ask first service last night if it still exists, and I was told it does. So that's good, right? I drank RC KFC, and we ate moon pies, and we ate sausage, gravy, and biscuits. That was amazing. Country ham. Oh, my gosh, it was so, so good. I remember all these fascinating stories that my mom Ruby used to tell me about my dad as a boy growing up. My dad, he lost his dad to TB when he was 6 years old, and so he kind of grew up without a dad and had a pretty rough life. And then he got to high school and got drafted to go fight in World War II and was in Patton's army. And so I used to love to hear stories about my dad and him growing up. And then I remember tossing and turning on those hot, humid Kentucky nights. And if you've ever been to Kentucky in the summer, you know what I'm talking about. On that vinyl green sticky couch that was in Ma Ruby's living room that I was forced to sleep on. And I remember how brutal those nights were. But as brutal as those nights were, the payoff came the next morning, because every Saturday morning, if I was at my grandma's house, I would wake up and I knew that Ma Ruby and I were going to watch wrestling. We were going to watch us some wrestling. My grandma, she loved to watch wrestling. I mean, she was into it. Little black and white TV set in her living room right there. She's screaming and yelling. It was amazing. So this is back in the 70s as I'm a kid growing up. And there were 3 wrestlers back then who were really, really popular. You may have probably never seen them. It's probably a regional thing, but here they are. So, so you had Jerry the King Lawler. He's in the middle. Then the guy on the left, that's handsome Jimmy Valiant. That's superstar Bill Dundee. Does anybody actually remember these people? Yeah, thank you very much. Way to go. And he had a nice mullet going over there. So, so anyway, when I first started watching wrestling back then, the 2 guys on the left, Jimmy and Jerry, they were bad guys, because you had good guys and you had bad guys, you know. And so then I'm watching with my grandma, and then all of a sudden they decided at some point in time they were going to be good guys, and they switched sides and they became good guys. And I didn't think about it much at all as a kid, because that's what wrestlers do, right? And so it was pretty common back then. But as I think about it now, I'm like, how does that really work? I mean, how does that really work? I mean, do you just flip a switch? Or you just wake up one morning and say, I'm going to be different. Now, I'm going to be a different kind of rebel now. I mean, is that how it happens, or is there more to it than just that? Now, here's what this has to do with this series, okay? We're talking about being rebels, a different kind of rebel. We're talking about being rebels for good. The truth is that rebel, the term rebel, could be used to describe every single one of us before we bumped into and experienced Jesus. Here's the question. Could it be and should it be a term that's used to describe us after we decide to follow Jesus? And if so, what does that look like? That's what we're trying to unpack together in this series. So there's another story from the Bible that I want us to jump into together this morning, because I think it's going to help us get some more clarity around all of that. So let's jump in and let's do this. We're going to Acts chapter 9 today. So last week, Old Testament. This week, New Testament, completely different person. Last week, Nehemiah. This week, a different guy, a guy named Saul. So if you have a Bible, go to Acts chapter 9. If you don't, they're on the back tables. You can hit our app, hit YouVersion, or just read with me on the screen. So Acts chapter 9, we're going to pick it up at the very beginning of the chapter. Got lots of verses to read today. Excuse me. Here we go. Followers of Jesus. All right. So if he found any Jesus followers, whether men or women, he might take them as prisoners to Jerusalem. And as he nears Damascus on his journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground. He heard a voice say to him, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Who are you, Lord? Saul asked. I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting, he replied. Now get up, go into the city, and you will be told what you must do. The men traveling with Saul stood there speechless. They heard a sound, but they did not see anyone. So Saul got up from the ground, but when he opened his eyes, he could see nothing. So they led him by the hand into Damascus. And for 3 days he was blind, did not eat or drink anything. All right, let's stop right there. So this guy Saul is obviously a rebel. By our definition, he's a rebel. He's rising up in opposition against something. He's rising up in opposition against God, God's church, his son Jesus, the followers of Jesus, against the advancement of God's kingdom. Right? That's what he's doing here in the story. Right out of the gate, we've got a rebel here. So here's the question. If we were God, what would we do to stop the rebellion? If we were God, what would we do to stop the rebellion? Now, I think there's all kinds of ways we can answer that question, but I really think the best way for us to stop the rebellion would be to crush the rebel who is leading it, cut the head off of the snake. And God certainly seems to have Saul in a position where he could easily do that. And if he did that, if he decided to crush Saul here, people who were followers of Jesus everywhere would stand up and applaud because they're scared to death of this guy, all right? So before we go any further into this story, I think we need to pause here. And I think we need to pay attention to something. We need to recognize an important distinction that is getting ready to play out before our very eyes in this story. So here we go. Let's start today, this morning, with this. Church people. Churches and church people write rebels off. God redirects them. Churches and church people, we have this bad tendency. We just write rebels off. God redirects them. Totally different story, all right? If you just follow simple logic here, and honestly, if you ask most church people what God should do with Saul in this moment, the answer would be leave him blind, write him off, wipe him out, kill him, and destroy him. That would be probably the best possible answer, and I love this about this story. That is not God's heart for this rebel named Saul. And the good news for you and me this morning is this. That is not God's heart for all of us rebels sitting in this room this morning either. He has a different plan. You see, there's so much hope for all of us in this story. See, let's be honest. All of us have times in our lives where we've rebelled against God. We have, and no matter how bad it is, what you've done, who you've done it with, when you last did it, how many times you've done it, no matter how jacked up and brutal the things you've done in your life are, even if you did it, when you did it, you knew, look, this doesn't line up with what God wants from my life. This would be something that he would consider sin. This is bad stuff. I know God doesn't want this, and you do it anyway. And all those times, here's what you need to understand. God never writes us off, and he is never, ever finished with us. Ever. There's so much hope for us in Saul's story. I love the way, I was at a conference 4 or 5 years ago, and I heard Andy Stanley unpack his version of this moment in the story, and I thought it was really, really good. He says, this is not in the Bible, this is just what I think. And but it's great, so I'm gonna do my best to tell you. So in Acts chapter 1, right, Jesus goes up to be with the Father. He's been resurrected, and he spends some time on earth and gets his disciples ready to go to start this thing we do called church, and then boom, he's gone. Well, not too long after that, when we get to chapter 9, the church is being persecuted. Actually, it's in chapter 8 and before that. The church is being persecuted. The church of Jesus is being persecuted, and his people are starting to run away. They're starting to scatter all over the place. And so God calls Jesus aside and he says, son, we got a problem. I want you to look down. See what's happening to the church? Your movement's not moving. Your revolution is not revolutionizing. Your people, they're huddled up and they're scared. They're living in fear. He goes, with all due respect to Peter, James, and John and the guys you've chosen, they're great guys, but I think we need another guy. I think we need a different kind of guy. We need a leader to lead this revolution. We need someone who's fearless, who's courageous, who's unafraid, someone who refuses to take no for an answer, someone who's willing to get on a boat and go somewhere if that's what we need him to do. We need someone who's a little bit intimidating. I think we need a different kind of guy, and just for kicks, how about this? How about we pick a Pharisee and tell them if they do a good job, we'll let them write half the New Testament. Right? And Jesus is like, Father, with all due respect, I don't think we can find this guy. And God's like, oh yeah? What about him? And Jesus like, who? Him? No, him. Him. He's like, Saul of Tarsus, are you kidding me? He's killing our people. And God says, exactly. He's exactly the kind of guy that we need. I think there's a lot of truth in that. You know what I think? I think we miss this in the church. Think back about those wrestlers that I started talking about. They switched from bad to good, but here's the truth. The very things that made them successful on the bad side of things were the things that could and would make them successful on the good side of things too. And we miss this. So we miss this so often in the church. We come to know Jesus and we put our faith in Jesus and we start to follow Jesus. And it's so good and it's so true. And we get a new heart. We get a good heart, and that's a great thing. Here's the thing. And our sin issues dealt with. Jesus on the cross. Boom. Sin's gone forever. Today's, yesterday's, tomorrow's. Boom. It's gone. So sin is gone, but our story and our glory isn't. This is the part we miss. See our story, there's significance to the things that have been done to us, said about us. So that's why in this place we say you got to discover your story. You got to stay in your story. You got to stay in your story. Boom, because story doesn't go away when you come to follow Jesus, and neither does glory. And that's the part I really want us to focus on now. What am I talking about? I'm talking about your gifting. I'm talking about your personality. I'm talking about your strengths. I'm talking about your talents, your tenacity, your passion. These things that, come on, let's be honest. These are the things that brought you so much success before you bumped into Jesus and the world around you. So many of these things were put inside of you to bring you success and helping advance the kingdom after you come to follow Jesus. I just think it's unfortunate, but we miss this. We miss this in the church. So I grew up in a very, very small church, about 50 people or so. So I knew every man in the church, every single man in the church. But here's what I want to tell you. My dad did not know the Bible as much as most of the other men in this church. My dad never prayed publicly. It was embarrassing for me as a kid because they in the church I grew up in, it was like, I'd call on you. John, will you close us out in prayer? I'd call on you from the stage. They'd call on my dad. If they didn't know, they'd call on my dad every once in a while. And then he would ask someone else. He'd call out somebody else's name. Or when I got to be old enough, 10, 11 years old, I would just start praying. As soon as they called my dad's name, if someone made that mistake, I would just start praying for it. But my dad, he didn't pray. But can I tell you something about my dad? My dad was the only man in that church I really wanted to be like. He's the only man in the church I really wanted to grow up to be like. You want to know why? Because it seemed like to me every other man in the church checked his man card at the door before he walked in the church. I really couldn't understand that. And when they came into the church, they were weak and they were passive and they were silent or they were quiet or they were mousy or they were checked out. Right? They were nice men. They were religious men, but they had no passion, no fire, no tenacity, no real strength at all. And as a little boy, I'm watching this, and I couldn't really figure it out. And then I got to be a little bit older. You know what I discovered? That a lot of these guys in the church were very successful in the world. Very successful, had a lot of talent, a lot of ability, a lot of skill that was bringing them great success in the world. They were making a difference in the world. They really were. But somehow, some way, it seemed like when they pulled into the church parking lot, my gifts, my talents, my strengths, my tenacity, my fire, my passion, whoop, it's not welcome inside the walls of that place. So I think I got to leave that in the car. And here's what it did to me as a boy growing up in church. If that's what it means to be a follower of Jesus and be a Christian man, I'm out. I don't really want that. I'm telling you, we've got a bad tendency in the church of writing rebels off, of pushing down these rebel-like qualities that exist in us that God has placed there for a specific purpose, that are a good part of life. That God wants to take these things that He's put there, and He just wants to redirect them a little bit. But we just, in the church, we just tend to write them off. You know how I know this? This is my story. I'm a redirected rebel. And it's exactly who you've been created to be too. So many of these qualities that God's placed in us in church, we try to remove them. Got to remove that, got to remove that. Oh, don't do that. Don't show strength. Remove that. God's trying to redirect them. So important that we understand that. All right, so let's get back to the story. So God shows up. He goes to a guy named Ananias who lives there in town. He says, I got something I need you to do, Ananias. I need you to go see this guy named Saul. And Ananias is like, Saul, that name's familiar, Saul. And whenever I read this part of the story, I always think of the Disney movie, The Lion King. I don't know if you've seen it. I love that movie. But there's this scene, in I think it's 2/3 of the way through or so, where Pumbaa meets Nala, the lioness. I don't know if you remember that. She's chasing him, and he gets stuck under a log. And little Timon comes running up. It's like, what's the matter? What's the matter? He goes, she's going to eat me. Do you remember that scene? Well, that's what I think about in this moment with Saul, because God comes to him and says, Saul. And he's like, Saul, that name sounds familiar. See, okay, time out. I know this cat, Saul. Yeah, I know this dude. And he kills people like me, so no thanks. That's basically Ananias' response. Now, let's pick up God's response to that in verse 15. All right, so that's where we are in the story. But the Lord said to Ananias, go, this man is my chosen instrument to proclaim my name to the Gentiles and their kings and to the people of Israel. I will show him how much he must suffer for my name. Then Ananias went to the house and entered it. Placing his hands on Saul, he said, Brother Saul, the Lord Jesus, who appeared to you on the road as you were coming here, has sent me so that you may see again and be filled with the Holy Spirit. And immediately something like scales fell from Saul's eyes. He could see again. He got up. He was baptized, like our buddy was. And after taking some food, he regained his strength. All right. So we need to pay close attention to what God is saying here. Here's what He says. You ready? I've chosen you, Saul. Wow. Now you think about Saul's story to this point. I've chosen you, Saul. Now, we don't do this very often in this place, but I want you to do something for me. I'm going to count to 3. I just want you to say, I've chosen you, and then I want you to insert your name, okay? 1, 2, 3. I've chosen you. Now, here's the question. Do you believe that? Do you really believe that? Why in the world would God choose someone like you? It's because of what He does, right? I want you to think back about to playground. You remember when you choose up teams? You're a kid growing up. It's time to play dodgeball. You're the last one picked. Can I tell you something? I'm not trying to hurt your feelings, but you didn't get chosen. You were just the last one that was left. They didn't have a choice. Now, I'm not trying to hurt your feelings. I'm trying to help you see this. There's been so many things that have happened in our lives and in our stories. There's been so many experiences that you and I have had trying to travel our best through this thing we do called life. There's been so many experiences that you and I have had as we bumped into an experience, not Jesus, but this thing that we do called church, that leave us convinced that we're not worthy to be chosen. And that is not true. Let me paraphrase what God says to Saul here, what Ananias says to him. He says, I chose you to rescue. It's going to be hard. I chose you, Saul, to rescue. It's going to be hard. Difficulties coming. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be inconvenient. Let's just go ahead and call it what it is. You're going to have to suffer for me. You're going to suffer on behalf of my name. Now think about that for just a second. That is so inconsistent with the life that Saul has lived to this point in time. This is so inconsistent with the religious life that Saul's been living. He's got it freaking made. He does. Not only that, he's being asked to go to the Gentiles, non-Jewish people, which means that his Hebrew Jewish resume is going to mean far less too. And here's what I'm trying to help us see with this. The true rebels for good that we've all been created to be, rebels trade religion and resumes for rescue. It's what God asks us to do. They trade in the religious stuff and the resume stuff for rescue. Now, if you read Paul's resume, and he lays it out for us in Philippians chapter 3, so you should go there and read it. We're not going to turn there. It's pretty fantastic. I mean, it's pretty impressive. And he even says this. He lays out his resume and he says, so, you think you got reasons to be confident? You think you got reasons to boast or brag? I have more. And guess what? He's right. His resume is so impressive to any Jewish person who would ever read it. One of the most impressive Jewish resumes ever written, I think. But let me just say this. The fact that he's been circumcised on the 8th day, which is in his resume, you got to read it, Philippians chapter 3. He puts it in there. Circumcised on, I think he leads with it. Circumcised on the 8th day, that is not all that impressive to someone who's not Jewish. I mean, I don't read that, oh my gosh, Paul was circumcised on the 8th day. I don't read that and go home today after second service. I got to get home. I got to get on my computer. I got to update my resume. I'm circumcised on the 2nd or the 3rd day. I can't really remember. I got to call my mom. I mean, I was there, but I don't remember. That's probably good because I'm sure it hurt, right? I mean, it's just like, no. We don't do that. See, here's the thing. To these Gentiles that this guy Saul is going to be sent to reach, they could really care less. This past Monday, I went to the dentist. So I went to the dentist to get my teeth cleaned. I have to do that twice a year. Stacy makes me. So I hate going to the dentist. I really do. I'm not scared of the dentist. It's inconvenient. It's just always like, it's a terrible time. I got to go to the dentist. And anyway, so it's inconvenient. And even though I'm from Kentucky, I enjoy having teeth. Unlike some of my cousins, I like my teeth. I want to keep them, so I go. So I go to the dentist on Monday, and this nice lady's cleaning my teeth and all that. And as she's cleaning my teeth, she asked me this question. She said, so what do you do for a living? And I said, she had her fingers in my mouth. I'm like, okay, I don't know a lot about being a dental hygienist, but take your fingers out of my mouth if you're going to ask me a question. That's just helpful. So tell all your dental hygienist friends that. You'll help them out. All right, so anyway, she says that, and so she pulls her fingers out of my mouth and said, I'm one of the pastors over at Discovery Church. I could tell, boom, like that. She was totally unimpressed. And that is not uncommon in Colorado Springs. You need to know that, all right? So pray for me, because people ask me, what do you do? I like to say, well, I'm a life coach. I'm a salesman. I sell Jesus. I'm the ringmaster of a circus. Look around. You know it's true, right? It's just like, whatever. I don't like. But anyway, so she says, tell her she's unimpressed, and she says, so do you have to have any special training or education requirements in order to do that? And this time she took her fingers out of my mouth. So I said, it really depends on the church or the denomination that you're talking about. Some require different levels of education, and then others don't, and all that. And I wanted to say to her, I don't really have any education or training at all, but I got a couple of rattlesnakes in the car that we use on the weekends if you want to pet them. Sometimes I'm not so nice. But I didn't say it. I just thought it. So But so then she says, well, I'm Catholic, and man, in the Catholic Church, we're really serious about this education thing, and all priests have to have it, and I think it's a very necessary thing. I'm like, yeah. So she didn't really talk to me much about me. She didn't ask me personal questions like, what's your background, what's your education? And I was kind of glad that she didn't, because mine would have been very impressive to her. I mean, I have a law degree. I practiced law for 10 years. I passed 2 state bar exams, and then I got this master of ministry degree, right, from a seminary. But it's not, it's not a MDiv or a THM or a PhD like some other pastors, have. And that's a big deal to some people. In fact, we've had people leave our church here at DCC because I don't have an MDiv or a THM or a PhD. And so you get up and leave right now, we're going to think that's what you're doing. So sit tight. Yeah, but I'm not, but education and training is very, very important to me. That's why I continue. I take a seminary class every single semester still at the age of 53. I just finished up. The last semester, I had to memorize Deuteronomy chapter 22. So if you want to know what to do when you encounter an ox or a sheep on the road, I'm your guy, okay? If you want to know, you're walking down the road and you see a bird's nest, whether it's in a tree or on the ground, with a mother sitting on her young, what should you do? You can take the young, but not the mother. You have to let her go. I'm your guy with that. You build a house and a roof, you better build a parapet around it. Do not plant 2 types of seeds in your vineyard. Do not yoke an ox and a donkey together. Never do that. Do not weave linen and cloth together. Don't do it. I mean, if you want to know any of this stuff, I'm your guy. Aren't you glad I'm educated? Now, here's the thing. At the end of the day, it is not Saul's religion or his resume that's going to make the difference. You want to know what it is? It's the rebel-like qualities that God's placed inside of him. It's his story. It's his gifting. It's his passion. It's his tenacity. It's his strength. It's who God's created him to be, the glory of his life, coupled with his own story, coupled with the mistakes that he's made along the way, and he's made some bad ones, coupled with this guy that he bumped into on this road to Damascus called Jesus, and then how his life will never be the same now because of that. That's what makes the difference. That's what makes the difference. And here's the thing. Here's the beautiful part about this for you and me today. Every single one of us we sit here today either already has that or we can have it before we walk out of this room today. And Paul says, you know what? I could boast about a lot of things in my resume, but I'm not going to boast about that. I'm going to boast about this. I'm going to boast about this. And every single one of us has that. Here's the thing. Your resume and your religion will always pale in comparison to your personal experience when you bumped into and experienced Jesus. Your story will be more effective in reaching and rescuing some people than mine ever will. Rebels trade in religion, all this stupid religious stuff, and resumes. Got to do this, and this. Resumes for rescue. I think we really need to think about that. Well, let's finish up this story. Read a few more verses. So Saul, verse 19. Saul spent several days with the disciples in Damascus. At once he began to preach in the synagogues that Jesus is the Son of God. And all those heard him were astonished and asked, isn't he the man who raised havoc in Jerusalem among those who call on his name? And hasn't he come here to take them as prisoners to the chief priest? And yet Saul grew more and more powerful and baffled the Jews. He confused the Jews living in Damascus. Why? By proving that Jesus is the Messiah. Why was that confusing to them? Because a week before, he was saying, that guy's not the Son of God, and if you believe that and want to teach that, I'm going to kill you or lock you up. So they're confused by that. So what happens? After many days had gone by, there was a conspiracy among the Jews to kill him. But Saul learned of their plan. Day and night, they kept a close watch on the city gates. They're trying to see him going in and out so they can kill him. But his followers took him by night, lowered him in a basket through an opening in the wall, and he escaped. So the people in the town there struggle to believe that Saul is the real deal. Wouldn't you? I mean, think about it. This dude who was killing Christians, locking Christians up, he's now sitting and standing next to you in church singing, I'm no longer a slave to fear. And you're looking at this guy like, you killed my dad 6 months ago. They're confused and they decide what? We got to kill this guy. And so he flees. He gets out of Damascus. And then, if you got to read this in Galatians, some other parts of the New Testament, he goes to the desert of Arabia for about 3 years. Then he comes back to Damascus and he ultimately goes to Jerusalem. All right? This is his story, right? Here's the point I'm trying to make. He doesn't become an overnight success. Oh yeah, when I follow Jesus, health, wealth, prosperity, it's going to be great. He doesn't become an overnight success. In fact, discomfort, inconvenience, suffering for the name of Jesus becomes really real really quickly for Saul. In fact, if you keep reading the story and you piece it all together, it's going to be about 10 years. He's going to preach a little bit, but it's going to be 10 years before he hooks up with this guy named Barnabas and he effectively walks into becoming this rebel for good that he's created to be. That pause in Saul's life, that 10-year pause in his life, so important for you and me as we sit here today, because here's the deal. A big part of you and me becoming rebels for good, the rebels for good that we were created to be, requires us to understand and embrace this. It's pretty simple. Rebels refuse to quit. Things get hard. We refuse to quit. Things get uncomfortable. We refuse to quit. Things get inconvenient. We refuse to quit. Rebels refuse to quit. You know, as I talk to people who are going through lots and lots of hard stuff in their life, I've come to this conclusion that one of the biggest challenges for us as we try to follow Jesus is this. It's staying the course and refusing to quit as we wait on God. Waiting on God is not an easy thing to do. One of the most challenging things for us as we try to follow Jesus is to stay the course and wait on God as we're waiting for him to change our circumstances, to do something, to change things up in our lives and in our stories. I was talking to a guy in the lobby last weekend, and he was sitting at Starbucks and said, I felt like God said, go to that church. So he came over on Saturday night. He comes over and he says, hey, can you help me with something? I feel like God said you need to come over here. And he said to me, it's time to take the promised land. He said, but he's been saying this thing to me. I don't really understand what that means. I'm waiting for something to change. Nothing's changing in my life. So he asked me to help him interpret it. I don't think I was really any help at all. But it made me think about my own story and how much that has been true in my life and how I've struggled to wait on God. See, I didn't sign up to be a pastor. I didn't sign up to do this. You want to know why? Because I wanted to be rich. My mom used to say to me as a kid growing up, you're going to be a preacher someday. You're going to be a preacher someday. She must have said it a dozen times. I thought she was crazy. It's like, cuckoo, no way. I am not ever going to do that. And if you look like first 35 years of my life, rebel. Rebel was a better description of how I was living my life than this guy's going to be a preacher someday. 20-something years ago, I was sitting in the conference room of my law firm. I was practicing law. I had a couple other lawyers working for me. I was there 6:30 in the morning. Nobody else was there. I was really wrestling with God. I had been doing a lot of volunteer work in my church and leading some stuff and all that. And so God's tugging my heart hard towards ministry. I had my mentor, Bob Russell, was saying, you're going to be in ministry someday. You're going to be in ministry someday. So all these signs were there, and it's like pulling. That's where my heart was. It's like, yes. But I was like, God, I don't get it because you're pulling me this direction, and yet you're not opening a single door for this to happen. It ended up being like a 4 or 5 year transition for that to happen. That was really, really hard on me. This waiting on God thing's a tough thing. I remember 8 years ago, I'm on my face, literally on my face, crying out to God, praying to God, and I promised him, I said, God, I'll get out of ministry for the rest of my life. I will leave ministry. I'll never look back if you will get my family out of Colorado Springs. That's how hard this DCC story was 8 years ago. It was brutal. We weren't growing. Financially, we were sinking week to week. It seemed like every week, are we going to close? Are we going to stay open? It was brutal. And I'm like, God, I am tired of you waiting on you to change this story. I'm ready to quit. I'll just quit. I'll quit everything. I'll quit not only DCC. You get me out of the city, I'll quit ministry for the rest of my life. This is hard. I want to quit. This waiting on God thing is very, very hard. My guess is we've all experienced that. Have you ever experienced that in your life? Sure, we all have. Now, here's the thing. God has this tremendous call on Saul's life. And then he leads him down this path of waiting for 10 years. And then, check this out, the story gets worse. It gets worse. We get an updated resume, 2 Corinthians chapter 11. Resume goes like this. I got all this impressive Hebrew stuff, Jewish stuff. Then I meet this guy named Jesus on the road to Damascus. Then I'm forced to wait for 10 years. And then, okay, check this out. Things get a little bit dicier. I've been whipped 39 lashes 5 different times. I've been beaten with rods 3 times. I've been pelted with stones. I've been shipwrecked 3 times in the open ocean for 2 days. I've gone without sleep, without food, without clothes, without water. I've been cold and naked. And then he goes through this list of all these things. You're like, don't want that, don't want that, don't want that, don't want that. Right? And he gets to verse 30 and he concludes this list with this. He says, if I must boast, I will boast of the things on the first half of my resume. No. I will boast about those things. I'm going to boast about the things that show my weakness. Why? Because in my weakness, God has an opportunity to do something special. He has an opportunity to show up for me. When I am weak, I'm strong in God's strength. And you know what else? I find purpose and meaning and significance in my life like I've never found before. And that's what he says right here. So yeah, I could boast about all that stuff on my resume, the kind of stuff that you and I would brag about. But no. I'm not going to boast about that. I'm going to boast about this. Let's be honest. Not only do we not boast about these things, we push back on these things. We run from these things. We try our best. Come on, we try our best to avoid these things. I mean, I'll be honest with you. That's my MO, is I try to follow Jesus. Always has been. Now I'm getting better, but some days, somehow it shows up. I'm in until things get tough. I'm in until things get challenging. I'm in until things get difficult, till it gets uncomfortable, till it gets inconvenient for me. Then a lot of time what? I just quit. I just give up. I just quit. And I'm not alone in this. We're already seeing it. All right? I'm not trying to guilt you or shame you. I love you. I just want to say this to you. We're already seeing it heading into this summer. Because here we are heading into summer, only a couple weeks in. I know it's not officially summer yet, but it is for us. Everything changes in church world once you hit Memorial Day. And here's what's happened in the last few weeks, in the last month or so, giving has tanked in this place. It has. And I get it, right? Not only the amount that's given, but the number of people or families, the giving units. Right? I get it. It's summertime. And we got vacations we want to take, and lawn projects and landscaping lights and all this stuff that we want to do in summer. Me too. I mean, you got all this stuff that you want to do. I got other things I can use my money for. I need to do this. I want to do this. I got better options. Boom. And so what? So we just quit. It's what we do. I've been doing this church thing for a long time, but here's the thing. In February of this year, something happened in this place that just blew my mind. It made my heart jump. We doubled the number of people that were on mission with us financially like overnight. In like a week when we talked about money, we said boom, and the number doubled. I'm like, oh my gosh, God, this is the moment we've been waiting for 10 years, and now here we go. We're really going to be able to accomplish the mission that you've called us to. Boom, only to have that number drop 30% in the last 2 weeks. I'm like, here we go again. And it's disappointing. It's discouraging for me, man. And the enemy comes, he wants me to lose heart. Not only that, the number of people that are serving in this place for us heading into the summer. It's not at an all-time low numbers-wise, but percentage-wise, I think it's the lowest that we've ever seen. But come on, let's just be honest. This is what we do, right? We're in until it gets uncomfortable, until it's inconvenient, until we have a better option, until it gets hard or challenging or difficult. Life gets hard and we quit. I mean, life gets hard and we quit. Come on, this is not just a church thing. This is a life thing. Your marriage gets hard and you quit. Other relationships get hard, right? The relationship with your kid or with your girlfriend or your boyfriend, whatever it might be, boom, I'm out. I just quit. Your job gets too hard. You just quit. You know, education, you're taking classes. Ooh, these classes get too hard. You just quit. It's been my story too. Life gets hard and we quit. And so as I was thinking about it this week, I couldn't help but think about this. I think this might be helpful for us. So let's watch this.
The bell sounds, and 8 more men ring out of Class 234. 21 DORs and 2 medical rolls in 3 days reduces the class size by a third. The muster is down to 61 students. As the instructors intended from day one, more and more students are questioning their motives for being here.
Just rang out, Class 234. It was fun. I mean, it was a good experience. Really enjoyed it. But I think in order to be a Navy SEAL, you gotta want it more than anything else that you want, and willing to give up everything else to attain that goal. And I didn't want it that much.
I didn't want it that much. Ding, ding, ding. What's he do? He rings out. Can I ask you a question? How much do you really want the life that you came in here chasing after today? Because see, if we really want that life, we got to stop ringing the bell. I was talking to my friend Jay Redmond, Navy SEAL. And he was telling me that the guys who make it through BUD/S, which is what that is, it's the training ground, proving ground for future Navy SEALs. The guys who make it through BUD/S are not the biggest, the fastest, and the strongest. They're not the guys that when you first get there, you're like, that guy's a stud. He's certainly going to make it. No. He said there's one trait that is characteristic of every single SEAL that ultimately pins on a trident and becomes a SEAL. You want to know what it is? They refuse to quit. That in their minds, when they get there, I don't come hell or high water, as hard as this thing gets, I refuse to quit, I refuse to quit, I refuse to quit. I'm just trying to tell you this, rebels refuse to quit. See, ultimately, this guy named Saul is going to be given a new name, Paul, by God. But this is not just a simple story of a guy who gets a cool name change. Ultimately, this guy named Paul is going to write half of the New Testament. And he's going to unpack some incredible theology for us, some amazing theology, some stuff that we really much needed theology for us. Lots and lots and lots and lots of helpful information. But here's the deal. We make this mistake in church world all the time. Don't miss this. It's not about the information. It is the power of this rebel's transformation that brings every single one of us rebels in this room today hope. And not a single one of his rebel qualities is wasted. God takes them all and he just redirects them. And this cruel, just mean, very effective rebel, the most effective rebel that the church world has ever faced, ultimately becomes one of the greatest rebels for good that this world has ever experienced. I'm telling you, that is intended to be our stories too. We all have rebels inside of us that simply need to be redirected, so we need to embrace that. Embrace that passion, that strength, that fire, that tenacity, and those rebel-like qualities inside of you. We need to embrace that. What else we need to do? We got to trash the religious stuff. We got to trash the resumes. And we need to take up God's heart for rescue. And then despite the obstacles and challenges that come our way, we need to lean into God like never before. And above all else, we must refuse. I'm never, ever, ever going to quit. As we walk out these doors today, I promise you it's true. God has so much more that he wants to do in, for, and through the redirected rebel that he designed when he created you. Let me pray for us. Jesus, we need your help because we see the rebel-like qualities in us. And the rebel inside of us has led so many of us down paths that not paths you want us to walk, paths of destruction. The rebel-like qualities inside of us have caused a lot of harm to ourselves and to the people even that we love the most. And so when we look in the mirror and we think of that about that rebel, that's a rebel that we need to remove. And that's just not true. So much of what you've put inside of us you want to use for good. So would you help us to see it? Would you help us to redirect it? Would you help us to use that to join you in the story that you're trying to tell in the world around us? Help us to Jesus. Without your help, we can't do this. But with you, would you transform us like you transformed Saul to Paul? Could that be our stories too? And so that we could become the rebels for good that you created us to be. That's our prayer, Jesus. Come do what it is only you can do in us, for us, and through us. In Jesus' name, amen. Hey, thanks for being with us today. Appreciate that. You want to know more about this place, getting connected and so forth, go out the door, turn left. People in the garage there love to talk to you and help you out with any questions that you have. If you want prayer, there'll be people under these screens to my right and my left, right after I say see you next week. If you want to get on mission with us financially, we'd love to have more people on mission with us financially. We just try not to pressure people, and I promise we don't talk about money every single week. We don't pass a tray, a basket, a bag, anything like that. We hang boxes on the wall by the doors. You can hit our app or our website if you're one of those electronic people and like to do it that way. I'll be out by the fireplace if you want to talk to me. I hope they have a good day, the rest of your day, and you have a great week. We'll hope to see you back next week.